Marriott Bonvoy is in a weird spot. Over the past 10 years, they've taken one of the best point systems and pretty much set it on fire. There were bright spots, but now the program faces a crossroads. And to be fair, the cards can still make sense, but it's definitely tougher to recommend, especially if you like premium travel. A bit different than our standard videos, but today we're looking at the rise and fall of the Bonvoy program. Or another way to put it is how they Bonvoyed themselves and ruined their own system. I do think that this is something that people need to know, so big favors to hit the like button to help with the algorithm. If you know someone that might benefit, then share this with them. Okay, let's actually rewind the clock back to 2015 before all of these changes. Back then, there were two programs, Marriott and SPG. Opinions varied drastically. Before the merger, SPG was viewed as the gold standard for hotel loyalty, especially for credit card and point enthusiasts. Back then, the target value for SPG points or star points was 2.5 to 3 cents per point. The best comparison we have right now is probably Hyatt, and even then, Hyatt is a little bit worse. One of the big draws was the earn rate from their cards. You get up to 3x back at SPG and 1x on everything else. If you account for the value of the points, about 7.5 to 9% back on SPG and 2.5 to 3% back on everything else. There were a ton of benefits, redemptions were better, and there were less points in the ecosystem, meaning that you had less people fighting for spots. Taking a look at this comment from 2015, the reason SPG points are the best and so valuable is because they're so hard to get. The less points available in the marketplace makes them more valuable. That's why all the perks, always available rooms with points, all the upgrades and suites exist. Another benefit was the stability. So everything was pretty predictable and they had an award chart that people liked. Also, there were no hidden fees on award stays, so resort fees were waived on redemptions. The best part for us is that there were no sneaky rules by the properties. As long as there was a standard room available, you could use your points. So they actually had a no blackout policy, unlike just allocating maybe 10% of their base rooms to points. Back then, categories ranged from 1 to 7, and free nights were from 2,000 points to 35,000 SPG points. Later on, and what ended up being a fair rate was SPG transferred to Marriott at a 1 to 3 rate. So if you adjust these point costs, it's about 6,000 to 105,000 Marriott points right now in equivalent value. Let's look at one of the best redemptions in the past and we'll see how it's aged. Back then, St. Regis Maldives was a category 7 under SPG and 30k points per night. For high season, it was 35k, so a bit more. In addition, they did offer 5th night free on award stays, so if you ended up booking 4 nights, then you get that 5th night for free. This and the fact that they had no blackout dates or inventory controls helped a ton. Doing the math, if you were booking 5 nights and getting the 5th night free, that means you were spending about 26,000 points per night. This is in contrast to about 2,000 per night back then, so 7.7 cents per point for SPG. So in total, 5 nights was 130k SPG, or about 390k Marriott. Elite status was also amazing, and best parallel is Hyatt right now. You get SPG Platinum after either 25 stays or 50 nights, and they would upgrade you to the best available room, including standard suites, at check-in. We'll look at some data points later, but very different from what it is right now. SPG Platinum also had 4 p.m. guaranteed late checkout and lounge access or breakfast at most of their brands. Even if you had just gold status, you'd have 4 p.m. guaranteed late checkout, so a lot of brands will offer late checkout, but they try not to guarantee it, and then hotels play games. Even if you don't care about hotels and you're on team flights, it kind of still worked out because you could transfer SPG points over to airlines at a pretty good rate. Transfers were 1-to-1, and you also got a 5,000 mile bonus for every 20,000 point transfer. So for example, if you transferred 15,000 SPG points, then you'd only get 15,000 airline miles, so no bonus there. But if you did transfer 20,000, then you get 25,000 airline miles. The normal 20 plus an extra 5k for 25k. Back then, there were a fair number of people who basically only cared about SPG as a pseudo airline earner card. A big reason for this is that most airlines offer 1x back on everything, while the SPG card with that 5k bonus transfer is effectively 1.25x airline miles on everything. So pretty much 25% more than you normally get, and that adds up. Main idea of all of this is that it was the gold standard for hotel programs. Marriott, on the other hand, was seen as good, but not great, and the main draw was the footprint. And to be fair, compared to what it is right now, it was actually a pretty good program. There was an award chart, it was pretty predictable, and I liked it. The hotels were a bit less aspirational outside of maybe Ritz-Carlton's, but otherwise pretty predictable. It was a safe option, which is nice when you are traveling. Speaking of that, we actually just finished 3 weeks traveling in Japan. Ate a lot of great food, met a lot of you guys, and did a ton of skiing. probably the longest vacation that we've ever taken. The main reason I felt safe to do it was due to today's sponsor, Delete Me. If you have any social media, a lot of your personal information might be floating out there. Do me a super fast favor. Search for your first name, last name, and let's say email or phone number. There's a lot of websites out there that track this stuff along with your birth date, address, and even your relative's address and birth dates. This can be a huge risk for identity theft and also fraud. Another issue that's concerning for a lot of people is burglaries. So much so that it is common to recommend not posting travel plans or real-time vacation pictures. And to be fair, there are ways to remove this stuff yourself, but it can take hours. Delete Me makes it super easy, and I've been using them for more than a year. In that time, they've reviewed over 50,000 listings from over 100 data brokers. They do all of this stuff in the background, and they also get your personal information removed, all without me having to do anything. Maybe I'm alone here, but it's scary to have that information out there. On average, Delete Me removes over 2,000 pieces of data in your first 2 years using them. If you want to join me and protect your personal information this year, then check out joindeleteme.com/AskSebby and use promo code SEBBY for 20% off their US consumer plans. Okay, back to Marriott. Their acquisition of Starwood was announced in 2015 and finalized September 2016. For a while, the programs remained separate but linked. So you could status match between the programs and also transfer points, and this was towards the end of 2016. The transfer rate was what was going valuable at the time, so 1 Starwood point to 3 Marriott points. I'd argue that this was the golden era for both programs. Linking meant that you could capitalize on a lot of the benefits. A lot of people that had Marriott status could match over to SPG and were now getting upgrades. People that had a ton of SPG points transferred over to Marriott to buy Marriott packages, which was an interesting meta back in the day. A common belief is that Marriott didn't want to devalue the program too fast. They kind of wanted to treat it like a frog in hot water. The merger created the world's largest hotel portfolio, and on paper, a joint program meant more places to earn and also redeem for everyone that was part of the program. Another big benefit for us is that there were a lot of cards that were in play. Back then, you could pretty much get all of them and there were no issues. So a lot of people, including myself as well as Mandy, ended up pretty much getting every card. There also were new cards that were added, which helped with even more bonuses. In August 2018, Marriott Rewards, SPG, and Ritz-Carlton Rewards were combined into one unified system. Unsurprisingly, there were a lot of technical problems. Marriott essentially merged SPG's database into their own platform. This led to missing reservations, lifetime credits not applying, and also account login problems. There were still good things though, and especially for us. There was one now unified award chart, and it sounded pretty great. Hotels would range from category 1 all the way up to 8, but in the short term, they would cap it to category 7. So anything that would be in category 8 would only cost as much as the category 7s. Back then, it was 60,000 points per night, which was amazing. That means that you could book some of the best hotels in the world for 60k points. Think St. Regis Bora Bora or Maldives, Omaha in the Middle East, Ritz-Carlton Hong Kong, and a host of other options. Summer 2018 all the way up to early 2019 was a magical window for bookings and travel. This was also the peak and the beginning of the end. At the start of 2019, they announced a new program, Bonvoy. This marked a turning point for their program, but also for us as points people. Category 8 was introduced, and we kind of knew it was coming, but now top properties would cost 85,000 points per night. So even though it's annoying, we knew it was coming, and you still had until March 2019 to do bookings at that old rate. One issue that started coming up though, and is pretty prevalent now, is technicalities and limitations. Putting it a less polite way, it's hotels playing games. Back then, SPG's policy was very straightforward. If a standard room was available for cash, you could book it on points. Marriott had a similar policy, but with a catch. Hotels were allowed to limit the number of standard rooms that were available for redemption on a limited number of days. This meant that hotels could select a few rooms that were available on points and then say that everything else is not available. Some more nefarious properties played even more aggressively, where they would select less rooms to be eligible for that low standard rate. I think when we think of standard rooms, it's more about size, so if it's anything that is the smallest, then it should count. Some hotels, though, kind of separated it out, so if you had a higher floor, that's not technically a base room, and same thing if it's facing a good view. So in their case, a standard room was only the low floors and maybe the ones facing west or facing inwards into the hotel. Putting it another way, Marriott was charging more points, but not guaranteeing access. Upgrades also became a lot harder. So SPG was very good at upgrades to standard suites. In contrast, Marriott will try their best and in select suites and hotels were just less upgrade happy in general. There also were some problems with cards with the rebrand to Bonvoy. So first off, they were all rebranded, but second off, there were now a lot more limitations. So instead of being able to get the SPG and Marriott cards, there were now Bonvoy, and there were a lot of rules on approvals and intro bonuses. So before they changed their name, you could get all of them, and now you could get one or two. There were also two sides of it because there were two major bank programs that were now sharing this one program. I don't think that either bank was really happy with it, and there were rules within the terms saying if you got intro bonuses on one side, you pretty much couldn't do it on the other side. Main idea is that if you start in the point space before this merger, you could get a ton of cards that were keeper cards with free nights, and you might still have that now. If you started after or started right now, you're pretty much out of luck and you have to pick a side. Another disadvantage of this is that it was now harder to get a ton of points, and if you were trying to do a big fancy redemption to, let's say, the Maldives, then you need a ton of points. Okay, let's look at the numbers for the St. Regis Maldives, which we've been doing, but for this time and section of the program. So with the new category 8, it was 85k points times 5 nights. It'd be 425k Bonvoy, but you do get the 5th night free, so only 340k Bonvoy points. 340k divided by 4 meant that you were paying 68k Bonvoy per night. 68 isn't bad at all right now, but let's compare it to the old SPG program and the old relief program that was a few months before this. So a few months back, when category 8s only costed as much as category 7s, it would be 60k times 4, so 240k, and each night would only be 48,000 points, which is crazy. With the old SPG program, 5 nights with the 5th night free would be 120k SPG times 3, which is kind of the conversion rate, so 360k Bonvoy, or about 72k per night. So technically at this point in time, with the 85k points per night, it was still better than the old SPG program. It was now harder to get points because of less intro bonuses, but still viable. All of this changed just 6 months later. On September 14, 2019, Marriott introduced peak pricing. They had off-peak, standard, and peak. We'll look at the numbers, but it was still somewhat defendable. On the top range with those category 8s that we've been covering, if it's off-peak, then it's 70k per night, standard is 85, and then peak is 100k. The argument being that you would probably save money if you travel during off-season or maybe shorter season. Doing the math here for off-peak, 70k times 4, 280k, but 5th night free, so about 56k points per night. Standard is still 68k, and peak is now a bit more expensive, so 4 times 100k, 400k total, but 5 nights, so 80k points per night. Now we've pushed it over the edge, and arguably worse than the old SPG program, but just a 10% premium, so still fine-ish. The argument at the time was that it was supposed to open up more availability, but it kind of ended up being a very obvious devaluation. One of the big issues is that there wasn't really a rhyme or rhythm to this pricing, and it was very much up to the hotel. This ended up being a lot of guesswork and also just checking on our end, which wasn't fun. 2020 and 2021 were pretty interesting. There was a lot of stuff going on in the world, and because of that, a lot of people were not traveling as much, which meant more availability and easier access. You had to have points ready to go, but now was your window to burn them and actually find availability. To me and most people, that was the last hurrah, and we've kind of been on the downtrend since. In the last 3 years, we've seen the program get continually kicked and worsen. In 2022, it went from award charts to dynamic pricing. Dynamic pricing is the bane of most of our existence because now the price can be anything. With award charts, you know exactly what you're getting. It might be harder to find availability, but the price is relatively fixed. Now it can be based off market dynamics, but even when there's not demand during off-season, price doesn't drop down as much. Call me crazy, but I haven't really seen a good use case of dynamic pricing, and I feel like every time I see it, it's just a bad outcome. The benefit of an award chart is that you know what you're getting, and it rewards people that want to do research and find that space. Dynamic is supply and demand, but it leads to hotels playing games. Back then, for top properties, the goal was to find sub 100k nights and hopefully stitch a few of them together. Main reason being that there were cards that give you 85k certificates, and you could top off of up to 15k points, meaning that if you have a certificate and 15k points, then you could redeem for up to 100k. Given how hard it was to get points, certificate was the new meta and what you kind of had to do. Things became infinitely harder, but it was still at least possible. The carrot was still dangling in front of us, and we could theoretically still get it. You could catch your tail. Unlikely, harder, but possible. Fast forward to right now, so 3 weeks ago, and we saw Marriott increasing award costs once again, and a lot of this was on their top properties. A lot of the top ones now cost 150 to almost 200k points, and it just feels out of reach. A big issue for us as credit card people is that 85k certificate is pretty much not viable anymore because even if you stack on 15k, it just can't be used for these top properties. The carrot that was right in front of us is now gone. And to be fair, there still is a case for the cards, for elite status, and for normal travel if you care about things like free breakfast and late checkout. The pipe dream of aspirational and premium travel, though, is now dwindling and just feels non-existent. Funny enough, there technically is still an award chart, but one that we're not supposed to be privy to because it's on the back end. The only reason we even know about this is because people have done the work to figure it out. There's a really good post on this on the Award Travel subreddit. The main idea, though, is that instead of having set prices and, let's say, 3 different levels of peak, non-peak, and standard, you now have bands with a top and bottom. So for category 1, the bottom is 5k points, top is 16k. And technically now with the update, it's 18k. On the top end of category 9s, it's 88k as the bottom, and top before was 132k, but now it's 152k, which is a 20k jump, which is pretty crazy. Within category 9s, there are also subcategories, so kind of 9A, and this would include St. Regis and Ritz-Carlton Maldives, which saw a 20% jump. Bottom's 108k, and before the top was 164, and now it's 198. We've been using St. Regis Maldives for this video throughout it, so let's continue. If you're lucky enough to somehow find 5 nights with the bottom band pricing and also have enough points to even do this, then 4 times 108k is 432k Bonvoy due to that 5th night free, so about 86.4k points per night. On the top band before, it was 131k per night, and top band right now, 198k, times 4 is 792k, 5th night free divided by 5 is 158.4 thousand points per night. If you somehow are lucky enough to book at that bottom band, it's still a ton of points. You by yourself would not be able to get that many. It'd probably have to be player 1 and 2 and then transferring points in order to even get the 5th night free. Top band's pretty much non-viable given how expensive it is, and even if you have the 85k certificates, whether top or bottom band, it doesn't matter. If you could top off of a bit more points, more than 15k, then at least it could be argued, but right now the certificates are so capped and so hard to use. If you're just a city person, if you're doing normal travel, then fine, there are still a lot of use cases that make sense during busy times, but if you're looking for aspirational premium travel, it's tough. Best case of the new program right now is 86.4k per night, and worst case, and still kind of an ideal situation, is 158.4k. Compared to the old pricing of off-peak standard and peak pricing, 56, 68, and 80k, that's almost half the price. The worst part about all of this, and I hate to admit it, is that the math still works out. St. Regis Maldives is about 2,500 per night during peak season, so the top band. And it's pretty consistent during that whole peak season of November and December. Christmas and New Year's is more expensive, but that's pretty much always a no-go of points anyways. So 2,500 divided by 198k points is 1.3 cents per point. Our target for Marriott points is 0.8 and maybe 1, so 1.3 is technically still really good. For low season, so during monsoon season, it's 1,600 per night divided by 108k points is still 1.5 cents per point. Anything above 1 is good, and these technically are still good redemptions. Pretty much exactly the same math for the Ritz-Carlton during low season, where it costs about 1,600 per night. Ritz is surprisingly cheaper for this high season compared to prior years, where it floated around 3k. 1745 divided by 198k points is 0.9 cents per point. Even though the value technically is there, it's just unobtainable for normal people. If anything, the only people that would have that many points is going to be management consultants who travel for a living, so travel every week, or people who run businesses and put most of their spend on their Bonvoy cards. Or I guess people that had the points in the past, but didn't have a chance to use their points yet. The problem though is that even if you have other transferable currencies from the banks, it almost never makes sense to transfer over to Bonvoy. The rate doesn't really work, especially if you can get 1.5 cents per point through portals or through other programs. So for example, most banks transfer at a 1-to-1 rate, so 1,000 bank points would be 1,000 Bonvoy. In most cases, bank programs cash out at a 1 to 1.5 cents towards travel. So you might as well book through their portal and not have to waste time looking for availability because value is about the same and technically better with the portal. Even worse is if you decide to transfer to other programs like Hyatt or Hilton. So 1,000 bank points would be 1,000 Bonvoy, 1,000 Hyatt, or 2,000 Hilton without promotions. The Park Hyatt Maldives is a step down from the St. Regis and Ritz, but it's still nice and it's still an option. Retail price during peak season is half the price, about $1,200. Room cost is also a lot lower though, at $30K per night, and there is availability. $1,200 divided by $30K is 4 cents per point. So if I had one bank point where I could transfer it over to Marriott, where I get, let's say, 1.3 or 0.9 cents for that point, or I can transfer it over to Hyatt and get 4 cents, I'm taking 4 cents. For example, Waldorf Astoria Maldives is under Hilton. Peak pricing is about the same at $2,200. You do have to hunt for standard room availability and be very much on top of it, but it is possible to find it and stitch together multiple nights. So for example, for the month of November, right now, as of filming, there is one standard room availability on the 1st. If you are going for those type of properties, and same thing with flights, you want to make it part of your routine, like you would checking sports scores or like people checking the stock market. It sounds annoying, but if you bookmark things, it's about 5 to maybe 15 seconds every day. So in this case, one bank point is to Hilton with non-promotion rates. So 75K bank would be 150K Hilton. During promotions, it's oftentimes 1 to 3. So 50K bank points would be 150K Hilton. So 50K and 75K bank points for the Waldorf Astoria is still a ton of points, but it's a lot better than the Marriott equivalent. Marriott with those same bank points would be 100K to 200K. Call me crazy, but I'd rather do 2 or 4 nights at the Waldorf Astoria over 1 night at the Ritz-Carlton or St. Regis. I've been to the St. Regis, it's nice, but it's not that nice. Another major disadvantage is resort fees. For Hilton Diamond and Hyatt Globalist, you avoid these if you are doing award bookings. That's not the case of Marriott, even if you have top-level status like Platinum, Titanium, or even Ambassador. Depending on some of these properties, it could be an extra 20%, and it feels like a tax even if you want to be loyal to Marriott. Main takeaway, there still is value with the program, but it's more reasonable value rather than outsized and with amazing upside. Also, outside of points and redemption stuff, elite status took a pretty big hit. One of the big issues of having a very big program with a lot of members is that when you go to hotels, you have more people visiting, and a lot of people have elite status, making upgrades a lot harder. For example, for this hotel, during this instance, 81% of the rooms had someone with Bonvoy Gold status or higher. More than half the members had Bonvoy Platinum or higher, which is a lot of people. I think you can't blame credit cards for the inflation within Gold and Platinum, but for Titanium and Ambassador, those are pretty much all consultants and business travelers. When you have the biggest chain, you have the biggest footprint, and consultants pretty much need to pick it. When the consultants travel, even for fun, you now have more people who have high status fighting for those same rooms. Even during less busy times, availability for upgrades can be pretty tough because hotels play games and interpret rules differently. Most of the time, it depends on the property policy, but even the person that you're talking to. Another factor could be management, and it's not Marriott proper, it's going to be the hotel operator, so the one that owns the hotel. Some of them really don't like giving upgrades at all and kind of ignore Marriott and what they want, so they try to upsell if possible. So even if you are ambassador, you have top level status, you spend more than 20K on hotels with them every single year, you might not get upgrades because they don't feel like it, and you might just get water bottles. Breakfast is another pain point. Marriott Bonvoy probably has the most convoluted breakfast rules of any major hotel group, and it varies by brand and also region. So for example, if you're at a Courtyard, Moxie, or AC hotels, they don't offer breakfast to Platinums, instead offer food and beverage credits. Other ones like Ritz-Carltons don't offer breakfast or lounge benefits unless the hotel decides to be nice, like the Ritz-Carlton Kyoto. And to be fair, I still have the cards, I like elite status, I like staying at the hotels, but it went from 2 thumbs up to okay. If anything, I'm more bullish on Hilton if you're after upside and uncapped free nights. Hyatt's also great if you want upside and amazing value for your points, especially if you do want to transfer from some big bank programs. I still like Marriott, and ironically, I'm currently staying in one despite this whole video. This is an Autograph in Salt Lake City, pretty cool hotel. It used to be an old train station. I think my whole thing is I like their hotels, they're pretty solid, but I feel like they keep ruining their own award program. It's fine, but it feels like the glory days of outsized value is over. On that note, if you want to learn about cards, whether Bonvoy, Hyatt, bank programs, or cashback, and you want to support the channel, we do have links on the website, AskSebby.com, and also down below in the description box. Make sure the links are competitive, but otherwise, it is a huge way to support the channel, so thank you in advance. Again, thank you to Delete Me for sponsoring today's video. It makes it fun to talk about different topics while traveling. DeleteMe.com/AskSebby, promo code Sebby for 20% off the US consumer plans. If you made it to this point, leave a red square emoji because I'm giving them a red card in the comments down below, and I'll try to heart it and also respond. 3 questions: what are your thoughts on the program and where it's going? What's been your best and worst experience? And if you were to leave, which program would you go to? Let me know and everyone else know in the comments down below. Big favor, hit the like button, share this, but otherwise hope you liked it. See you next time.